We were agreeing way more than we thought we would.
Human beings did that. God didn't do that.
We want to leave it off the table if that's what you're wanting to do.
I don't agree with everything that you're saying.
There is no pastors, no disrespect.
I would love for you to bring me to the other side.
I have found my purpose in life. 3, 2, 1, go.
I would say that is correct. I found my purpose in life, but it's my professional life. That gives me a sense of what psychologists call self-actualization. So my name is Winston Charles. I was baptized or christened in the Anglican Church, so I consider myself an Anglican. My background, professional background, is arbitration, adjudication, mediation.
I have to make my meaning and purpose. So I'm the only one that can do that. I owe something to the universe or wherever we came from, or just nature in general. Hi, I'm Steve Jakatis. I'm an atheist/humanist. I'm a humanist officiant through Humanist Canada, so I conduct funerals, weddings, and other celebrations of life.
So I have a basic life philosophy of do what you want as long as what you're doing isn't harming anyone else. I'm very proud to be progressive and do that kind of thing. So my name is Gil, 22, university student at York University studying political science. I was brought up Anglican, turned atheist because of a combination of science and how do you know every other faith is wrong.
I appreciate the value of putting truth first. That's what I believe I found in the Bible. Yeah, my name is Greg Armstrong. I'm a pastor in the Mississauga area, West End, Toronto, of a Christian church. It's a Protestant and Baptist church.
Islam says, you and I didn't choose to be born. So we cannot choose our fundamental purpose. I'm not saying we can't choose what we're going to be within our human sphere, but we were born with certain things in our plate.
My name is Sabahat Ali. I am an Ahmadi Muslim, and I serve as an Imam of the Ahmadiyya Muslim community.
Everyone remembers God on a turbulent flight.
Like what the Bible teaches is that people have a general awareness of God through the created order, but that doesn't mean necessarily that everyone is going to default there in an emotional, stressful situation. But I do think that that does happen for a lot of people.
I always hear there's no atheists in foxholes, so that's kind of one of the things that I was thinking in my mind when that happened. I'm sure there are some people, like you said, who are potentially staunch atheists that when the bombs start flying, they're going to start praying or reverting back to maybe a belief that they had from their childhood. I wasn't really raised in a belief system, so for myself, the concept of God I understand, but I don't really understand the draw to it like other people might.
Plane crashes are scary. People don't know the statistics of how rarely they happen. People are just freaked out in the moment. Not everyone knows the stats. You just see that happening and you're thinking, okay, in that moment, I think I might die. Got to start thinking about the afterlife. If there's an afterlife, I don't want there to be nothing afterwards. I want there to be something. So obviously you're going to want to, I might turn Christian for 5 minutes on a turbulent flight too. A lot of people are going to go, okay, I'm about to die. There better be something after this, because if I'm done here, I hope I either don't go to hell or there isn't nothing afterwards.
Let's say, take all belief out of it. You have to think if this is the end or not. That question is fundamentally related to the idea of God. Yes, you can say that there may be some atheists who say that they will actively or naturally not think of any God at all, and they will have a different system. You said it beautifully as well, Greg, that it's within us to invoke whatever is out there.
There are a lot of people who actually put their confidence in the pilot.
Interesting.
Who believe that the pilot would know how to get them out of that turbulent situation. So I don't agree that everyone on board would think about God.
You can be spiritual without believing in God.
Nowadays, the spiritual but not religious movement, I think it's a cop-out. Any definition of spiritual that you raise without the highest and best religious teachings, firstly, they're all taken from religious teachings. 100% of them. There's not a single teaching in any moral philosophy anywhere in the world that does not lean on, depend upon, or borrow from religious teachings. In Islam, spirituality is your soul connecting with whatever is behind this universe in an active way. And anything that you call spiritual without God depends on God, the prophets of God, or the books of God.
I'm not spiritual. I don't even know what that word means, because to me it doesn't mean anything. People can claim to be spiritual, like you're saying, and not have any basis for saying that or claiming that.
Yeah.
However, there are people who claim to be spiritual without believing a God.
I could be in different spots depending on how we define each term. So believing in God with a capital G, which is the question, that typically connotes a transcendent personal God.
Yeah.
So if that's what we mean, then somebody could be flexible on the definition of spiritual, spiritual with a different concept of the divine. Typically, a lot of people are, and maybe believe more of a pantheistic concept of God, in which case I don't count that as with the capital G.
Yeah.
I think the perfect thing that you said, Greg, we're agreeing way more than we thought we would. We're maybe different questions. We're going to really go different. But anyway, if we just mean, can you physically hold that belief in your head? You can hold any belief in your head. You can believe a unicorn shot a laser out of their eye and that created the earth. People can make whatever beliefs in their head they want. You can make any thought in your head and think any thought you want. Maybe it's true, maybe it's not, but you can.
I would disagree that you can believe anything you want. You can think or conceive of something, but that's different than believing it, because believing it is affirming that it's true.
Well, yeah, but people can come to what people have come to. If you look at the diversity of beliefs humans have, there's
They can
so
be convinced
many
of something,
great
is what you're
diversity
saying.
of it. Yeah. If the other belief was, and this was what, if this was the definition, I'm about to move places. If we mean you can be spiritual without believing in God, and it can make like logical, coherent sense and possibly actually be true, I'm about to go to the other end of the room. But if you just mean, can you personally have that belief, then yeah, I'm right here.
A professor of Aboriginal studies, I went up to her and I said, you didn't make mention of God in your lecture. She said, no, we don't make reference to God. And she said, first, we believe in the vibration that propel the universe. So we communicate with water, we communicate with rocks. We have respect for animals. We have respect for the herbs. And she defines that as being spiritual.
If God existed, there wouldn't be suffering in the world.
Yeah, no, almost every religion and religious belief all involve something along the lines of, I'm not even just talking Christianity, which obviously was brought up in No Better. I mean, all of them all talk about in their faiths, like, just the way God's portrayed. There's nothing that says God wouldn't, there's no thing anywhere that shows anything about God not allowing suffering if he existed. In most religions and texts, there's always something about certain gods allowing this group, the people who follow me are good and deserve well, and the bad ones deserve to suffer, or certain people who say they're part of my faith but are coming over my teachings need to be tested, and part of the suffering is a test from God or whatever. Point is, God's morality doesn't necessarily have to involve everybody's, it doesn't have to be Garden of Eden 24/7, or everybody lives like Adam and Eve did before the fruit in the fall. If God came in our own image, and in our image, and we often hate people and believe certain people deserve to suffer, God made us in our image. So a lot of what we did came from God. God can believe certain people can suffer. I don't see any idea that God would just be like, everybody deserves hippie love, la la la, nothing bad happens, lollipops and rainbows. That doesn't seem very like a God to me.
The two atheists are on opposite sides. I want to understand.
Yeah, I find this
that.
fascinating. You'd think it's weird that I'm more with the conservative Christian, even though I'm atheist. It's weird, yeah.
If a God has the characteristics that I feel are contradictory, being all-loving, all-knowing, and what's the other one?
All-powerful.
All-powerful, or maximally powerful, then I believe that that being, having those characteristics, would create a world without suffering.
When we say suffering, if I'm working out to get fit, I'm suffering. Of course I'm suffering, and we celebrate that. This is one major thing that a lot of atheists do bring up, that if God really did exist, he should have created a version, and I really agree with Gil here, where there was no suffering, whereas the idea of suffering, having knowledge that that thing will hurt me, propels me into a course of action, to adopt a course of action that will minimize suffering. Then the idea of pain itself the entire ordeal of pain itself, it is a language that tells us that something is wrong. Talk to any physiologist in the world, any doctor in the world, or any science student, and they will tell you that if we did not have pain, that would be against a merciful God. Suffering in Islam actually refers to the interplay between life and death. And if we look at just evolution alone, it is this intricate interplay between life and death, the race to try to survive, to better ourselves and improve, that has propelled all of biological evolution from the unicellular organism to what we see today. Take suffering out of it, and I would agree that that God is selfish and did not want anyone to feel pleasure. We cannot experience pleasure without pain.
I think I draw the line with needless suffering. Okay, so that's kind of where I'm trying to go.
An example of needless.
So like needless suffering would be something like the genocide in World War II, right? Like extermination of the Jewish people and the Gypsy people who are completely wiped out.
That human beings carried out.
Right, but still, right? It just the idea of something on such a massive scale. Same thing.
Being allowed. You mean being allowed, like God allowing that? I'm trying to see, because human beings did that. God didn't do that.
Yeah, being allowed to happen, right?
Okay.
And the same thing when it comes to, and this is just my personal thoughts.
Yeah, no,
right? And the same thing happening with children who starve every day, or anybody who starves every day. You know, like I've been on the ground level. I've seen people. I've handed out food and clothing and whatever, right? You see these people suffering.
Yeah.
You see them to the point where it's beyond what I would deem as acceptable.
So there's enough food. We know the statistics. There's
Absolutely,
enough food in the world.
Absolutely.
So God provided. We have to look at the whole picture then, right? You're pointing out something totally valid.
No, I know.
I'm just humbly saying, again, look at the big picture. What did God do? God created a species that is capable of incredible good. We know that. We all know we are all capable of incredible good. Then He provided us more than enough fresh food and water. We chose to commit evil, and we're attributing that to God. If I choose to, use drugs every day, and I say God did this, why did God let me do this?
I mean,
there's no merit in life.
It seems to me it just comes down to agency, right? So if He's giving us that agency or not,
Yeah.
right? So if God
Free will.
sees, free will, right? I don't agree with everything that you're saying. One, like the need for suffering. I think if all that you meant was a capacity for suffering, in the sense of the capacity for pain.
Yes.
Then I'm fine with you. But then when you talked a lot about evolution and stuff, I don't agree with evolution. So, and I think that actually is a problem. But from a biblical point of view, we also have the fallenness of creation. So everything is now falling apart and corrupted, which is another difference that we share, like we don't agree on between Islam and Christianity, right? Because you have the doctrine of fitra, that we don't come into the world corrupted, right?
Yes, we are all
So that's a big
slates.
difference. So that's a foundational difference in doctrine about our worldview.
God has given us the willpower, use the word willpower.
Free will.
Free will or agency to make choices. That is reinforced by the fact that God has given us a 10 commandments, at least from a Christian perspective, to identify what we should or should not do. You should not steal, you should not commit adultery, you should not commit murder. So when I look into that, I'm suspicious that there is a God that is responsible for the creation of the universe, including us. But God has given us the latitude to make choices.
I agree.
And if we make bad choices, we could inevitably hurt others, which becomes suffering.
I appreciate both of your outlooks on this, and thank you for clarifying things with me. From the outside looking in, it's harder for me to be making that internal critique. You guys have given me some things to think about, so I'm going to go back to, home and think about this stuff.
I don't need a God to be a good person.
So I don't need to be agreed.
I think I spoke about that at the beginning, which is that we have chemicals in our body that reward us for being good. And so we don't necessarily have to be members of a church or religion. If we rely on how we feel when we interact with others, we would know whether we are doing the right thing. So we don't need a God to be a good person.
If this went further, I want to like run through the carpet. I'm so aggressive. Like, I'm not even here, I'm like here. The reason I'm so 1,000% aggressively on this side, when I look at politics and I decide what political policies I like, and the reason I became social democratic center left, is I looked at what works best in practice in the real world. People's good and bad behavior as people seems to have no, there's some like, Mother Teresa was a good Christian and then the Klan weren't. Like, anyone can be good or bad. And a great example, the perfect example of you definitely don't need God to be a good person. You can be non-religious and still be fantastic. Czech Republic and Estonia are 90% and 70% non-religious respectively, and they have almost non-existent crime rates, and they have some of the best qualities of life in the world. Estonia is 70% atheist, pretty nice place to live. Czech Republic's 90% atheist, despite being a former Soviet area, they've recovered surprisingly well. Czech Republic and Estonia, 70 to 90% non-religious, great place to live, most of their people are good, almost no crime.
I agree with some of the stuff Gil said. I would never go as far that way as I could possibly go. I do think I'm a good person. I
believe you.
won awards for being a good person. So as far as humanity is concerned, they consider me a good person. However, if there happens to be a God who doesn't deem me to be a good person, I can't be 100% sure, right? Maybe Morgan Freeman is waiting for me on the other side, and he's going to say, Steve, you did your best you could do, but it's not good enough for me. I would never know, right? So I'm doing the best I can with the knowledge that I have, and within my worldview, I think I'm a good person.
There's a group of anthropologists. They went back 4 million years and looked at how human beings interacted with each other. They understood that individually, if they just hunted and gathered, they'd be eaten alive. So they had to give each other company. And they shared what they caught or hunted. They didn't have any Bible to tell them to do this. And there was no pastors, no disrespect, to tell them that there's a God and God wants them to do these things.
There's a list of authors who had set out to study Islam only to try to defame it. Christian Orientalists. When they studied the life of the Prophet Muhammad, they have said that there is no human being that they have seen demonstrate a higher moral character. You were talking about, Gil, the actual practice, right? You can come up with any philosophy and say, the Prophet Jesus, peace be upon him, the Prophet Moses, I mean, these people demonstrated a level of morality and goodness that was absolutely the highest. There is no other example from all of atheism that I have ever studied that can be given that eclipses them in morality. That's the only reason I'm here, where I somewhat disagree. But fundamentally, as a human being, can we be a good person? Insofar as any definition of good that is seen in the rest of the animal kingdom, we as human beings, species, we can do it. But when we raise into what we call holiness or spirituality, that level has to have the thrust of believing in God, having a connection with God, and having the Quran, the Bible, and holy books that do remind us.
I agree. You don't have to believe in a monotheistic God or a God at all to do good things, to care for your kids, etc.
Yeah.
Okay? Or even be charitable or do really even high-level good things, okay? That's not why I'm over here. I'm more over here because of objective goodness. So if we're talking about goodness in an objective sense, then you need a transcendent metaphysical foundation for there to be objective goodness. Okay. If we're just talking about goodness subjectively or relativistically in terms of society and humanity, you know, you could be talking about a totally different standard that's then not objective. So if we're not talking about objective morality, then, or objective goodness, I could be anywhere. But if we're talking about objective goodness, here.
Religion and science aren't compatible.
Obviously.
So we're talking about testable, observable, repeatable, empirical science. I don't see how that is incompatible with, well, you know, religion in general. It's hard to speak of religion in general, but I'm speaking as a Christian. Where I think there's going to be perceived, if not more than perceived, contradictions is, when we're talking about evolution, we're talking about history. So I would put that not in the category of science, I'd put it in history. Because whenever we're talking about the past, we're not talking about something that we observe, repeat, and test in the laboratory. We have to extrapolate backwards from what we observe today. So I may observe sedimentary layers in the rock or fossils or whatever, and I have to extrapolate backwards with added presuppositions.
So the reason why I'm here on this line here, and I almost stepped to that line, because I do feel that religious people and religions in general can use science. And everyone is use science, especially Islam, right? Big history in science. However, I feel personally that the supernatural elements of the religions cannot be scientifically validated in using empirical evidence.
Religion and science, depending on how you interpret, people can interpret the Bible however they want, people can interpret Quran however they want. If you just look at established faiths, you can make a religion that takes in science and build ideas based on the science and think, well, the science indicates this, so here's what I think the religion is. So it is compatible depending on what religion you make. Then yeah, it can technically be depending on what you make and how you perceive it. So in that way, it is compatible. But the reason I say it mostly isn't is if we're thinking of the well-known established religions, and key word here, the interpretation made on the original founders of the faith or the original writings of the scripts of the faith and the very first true original interpretation of how it was first written and meant by the founders of the faith, and not a later reinterpretation like theistic evolution. Like theistic evolution is why I'm not there, because theistic evolutionists are a thing, so therefore you can put your faith and religion together, and that's why I'm not there. But in terms of like direct original interpretations, direct original primary source faiths that were made long before they knew about or had the science we had today have said things that have been disproven. I could go on for hours where we don't have the debate for now, but all I'm going to say is the evidence for evolution is much stronger than you're portraying it as. I could go on for hours. We don't have time.
My understanding, a very simple understanding, is that religion promotes faith. You must believe in what you can't see. And science, as I understand it, is based on clear and convincing evidence, facts. So I'm not quite sure that they're compatible. There are many people who, of course, belong to so many different religions, who believe there's a God, but they can't see the God. There's no evidence that there's a God, but they believe there's a God. Whereas scientists can show you their research. They can show you the facts.
About Gil, I'd like to say, you have assumed that what the original Quranic texts, because you said, yes, if the original statements by the prophets, not the later interpolations, which I really respect that nuance, I think it's very healthy and important, if they are scientifically accurate, not the reinterpretations, then we can have a discussion of whether it is or not. I'll give you two statements. What are the two greatest cosmological discoveries in the last century?
Big Bang and something else?
And the expanding universe.
Right.
Nearly undisputedly. And both of them are in the Holy Quran in such specific, unambiguous terms. I don't need to give you a single word of commentary. I literally just need to give you the exact line. Do not those who disbelieve in God see that everything that you see, that is the heavens and the earth and everything in between them, used to be a tiny closed up mass, and we caused them to blow out asunder. And then it says, we are the ones who brought this universe into existence, and we are the ones who go on expanding it. The word that's used for expansion is the first, like there are many words in a language. These are not words that require an iota of interpretation. So I would like to humbly challenge that actually the original statements of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, stand the test of time, the 1400 years, and as science has become more and more robust and powerful, and our scientific eye gleans deeper out into the cosmos and more into the micro universe, the Holy Quran is being proven even more true.
Depression doesn't need therapy, it needs God.
I not expect you to either.
It kind of goes back to the last question on science. I feel like science has really come far when it comes to understanding human biology and that type of thing. So I do feel like the scientific and world of medicine is better for treating. And I don't want to even say better, I just say when it comes to the actual issue at hand, if it comes from something to do with biology, I do think that medicine would be the best way to deal with it. However, there are people, and I know people personally, who have faith that gets them through periods of depression.
If you decide, oh, I don't need therapy, I need God, or like depression, or any sort of just mental health in general, because depression can also be part of other things. The idea that like you think God can help you can, regardless of whether you think God's real, that can end up going in some very like dark directions. People have said God or supernatural being within all faiths, Protestantism, Islam, Hinduism, Buddhism, Sikhism, all the faiths, have decided, insert name of supernatural being, told me to do name of horrific act, has happened many times.
I think it's kind of happened on both sides, though. There's been people that have been hardcore into medicine and even, homeotherapy or homeopathic remedies that haven't worked, or they've gone too far into the actual medicine that works but taken too high of a dose, could be dangerous. So we're talking about extremes on both sides.
Right. The other thing is just, it's not just don't need God, it's also, either way, regardless of what God tells you to do, if God is real, therapy still works in either scenario. If you go to the therapist and tell the therapist, God's telling me to do bad acts, the therapist can tell you, no, that's not God, don't do that. But even if you say, oh, God's telling me to do something good, like God's telling me to feed homeless people, or God's telling me to take a shower, or God's telling me to lift weights, then this therapy is still not a bad thing, because the therapist can go, regardless if I agree with that, regardless if I agree if God's doing that, that's good, do it. Therapy has scientifically been shown, doesn't always work. Some people go to therapy and it doesn't work. Therapy's been shown to work. Listening to voices you think are from God is like, it's a gamble's the best way to put it.
I'm going to defer to Ali on that.
Depression doesn't need therapy. That line right there, I already disagree with it. In Islam, the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, he said, there's knowledge of the human body. He specifically said this, ilm al-abdan. And then there is knowledge of faith and religion, ilm al-adyan. The same God who created the physical world, our bodies, also created the spiritual world. So both of these things go hand in hand. And actually, it is a mockery of God in Islam. If you don't take, for example, there's an example I was given, like a couple, they get married, and they just pray day and night, oh God, bless us with a child, right? But they don't actually engage in the act that produces a child. That's a mockery of God and his entire system. And that is completely irrational, even from an atheistic worldview. So the other thing I'd like to say, though, that God does play a very important role. Never before has humankind had more knowledge of resolving the issue of anxiety and depression. But depression and anxiety is consistently skyrocketing. You would think that if that was the entire solution, the graph would go down according to how much we have learned. However, as our knowledge of it has increased, of how to resolve the issue has increased, the depression and anxiety and the issues with mental health are skyrocketing at all-time high. The Holy Quran gives a very simple solution. It says you have a creator. Factor that into your life, and that will be something that helps your mental health greatly.
I'm not an expert on that, but I think that there are different reasons for depression.
Yes.
Depression is not a blanket symptom. Some people get depressed because they've had a childhood trauma which caused psychological injury, and they form a negative belief about their lives, and so they're not motivated to do anything. And I don't think that religion will cure that. That person will need to speak to a therapist.
Depression, even that it's a big category of, and as you said, there's different kinds of depression.
Well, no, reasons.
Yeah, I think there's different kinds too. And I think reasons, different causes as well, yeah. So I think therapy, typically for depression to be treated well, it involves multiple factors. It's not a simple thing. It's not like like the medication does all of it, or like from the physiological angle, or let's say the spiritual only. The Bible affirms the created order. So, and I think we're going to agree on that aspect as well, Muslims and Christians. The simple way of saying it is the Bible is sufficient, not exhaustive. So this is, in Christian theology, we would say the Bible is sufficient for knowing God, for having a right relationship with Him, and to live a godly life. but it's not exhaustive. It doesn't teach us everything. In fact, it tells us to study creation, to work in the world, right?
We're trying to, as a humanistic group of people, we're trying to create that same type of community. Churches have had a monopoly on it for so long that we're trying to, kind of copy the method of being there for people and having valuable people in the community come up and tell their story and share fellowship and have food and that type of thing. And the same kind of thing with the interfaith community. I think we're doing the same thing, trying to provide meaning and purpose for people and bring us all together.
Yeah.
So
That's a good note.
Yep.
Yeah. So I guess we're just looking at the whole handshake
Oh.
thing.
Thank you, man. That was awesome.
Here.
Good, huh?
Thank you so much. Oh, I'm gonna get a hug. Thank you, man. Thank you.
I don't need the hug.
do you need a hug? Because I need a hug.
Thank you.
I'm good with just the shake, no hug.
Just the
Loved, I
Not on
loved
the
what
mic.
you brought to the
on
program.
the mic.
Thank you, man.
So we
That
can
was
take these
awesome.
off now, I guess.
Winston,
Thank you so much.
thank you so much. Would you like a hug or not? No, okay.